It began with the weight of his stare. Heavy, unrelenting like a fist pressed against my chest. He wasn't just bigger than me, he was engineered for intimidation. Muscle stacked on muscle, veins like ropes, skin stretched too tight. His body was a monument to excess, a shrine built on needles and powders. And yet what unsettled me most wasn't his size, but the hunger behind his eyes. He singled me out quickly, the way predators do. The smallest comment turned into a threat, the lightest mistake into humiliation. His voice carried the promise of violence, not now, not here, but waiting. It was never about fists, not yet. It was about control, about making sure I knew he could snap me in half whenever he chose. I tried to ignore him, shrinking into corners, carrying myself with silence. But ignoring cruelty doesn't weaken it, it feeds it. Each day the threats grew sharper. He leaned in close, his breath sour with chemicals, promising that one day soon I'd regret every glance, every step, every breath. Nights grew restless. I lay awake listening for footsteps in the hallway, convinced he would break through the door. My dreams carried his shadow, towering, veins pulsing, eyes lit with something beyond rage, something feral, inhuman. I woke gasping, sweat soaking the sheets, heart pounding as though I had run for miles. The others pretended not to see. Maybe they feared him too. Maybe they enjoyed the spectacle. But I carried the weight alone, dragging it from dawn to dusk, until one day something in me cracked, not from courage, but from desperation. I began to look closer at him, not just his size, but the seams, the jitter in his hands when he thought no one was watching, the way his mood snapped like a switch from volcanic rage to hollow silence, the marks on his arms he tried to cover with sleeves, the scars from needles feeding the body he worshipped. I learned his secret not from whispers, but from watching. Steroids, more than anyone should endure, coursing through him like poison disguised as power. His strength wasn't earned, it was borrowed, stolen, carved into his body by chemicals that ate away at what remained of him. And in that weakness, I saw my chance. Reporting him wasn't heroic, it was survival. I gathered the fragments, the shakes, the rages, the scars, and fed them to those who needed to know. In the army, image is everything. Discipline is sacred. A soldier's body is not his own, it belongs to the machine, and the machine demands purity. Steroids were a sin that could not be forgiven.
When the investigation began, he sensed it. His eyes burned into me, suspicion curling his lips. He didn't need proof to know it was me. The threats sharpened, venom dripping with every word. But this time, I carried a quiet strength, the knowledge that his empire of muscle was already collapsing. When they pulled him from training, the silence was deafening. No more footsteps behind me, no more weight pressing against my chest. His career unraveled quickly, stripped of rank, his body suddenly nothing more than evidence. He was gone within weeks, exiled from the machine he once served. I thought it was over, that justice, in its cold, bureaucratic way, had saved me. But victory is never clean. Hatred doesn't vanish with punishment. It festers, mutates, lingers in places you can't see. The first night after his discharge, I dreamed of him again. Not as a man, but as something larger. His body swelled, muscles tearing, skin splitting, his veins burst with black liquid. His eyes glowed faintly, hollow but burning, his mouth twisting into a grin too wide for a human face. He reached for me, fingers cracking like branches, and whispered without words, "You ruined me. Now I will ruin you." I woke with scratches across my chest, faint, shallow, but too precise to be accidents. At first, I blamed myself, stress, nightmares, my own body turning against me. But then came the noises, footsteps in the hallway, heavy and deliberate, doors rattling softly, handles twisting though locked. I sat frozen on my bed, heart pounding, every sound a reminder that hatred doesn't need flesh to survive. The others heard nothing. They told me to move on, to let it go, but I couldn't. His shadow clung to me, thicker each day. Sometimes I caught his reflection in windows, towering behind me though I stood alone. Once in the gym locker room, I saw the mirror ripple as though something massive had leaned close, veins bulging, mouth curling in silent promise. It wasn't him, not exactly. It was what remained of him. The steroids had built a body, but they had also built something else. A hunger, a wrath, a ghost with muscles and teeth. And when his career collapsed, when his body was no longer enough, that hunger detached from him, free to follow me, to grow without limit. I destroyed his future, but in doing so, I had freed his shadow.
The house itself turned against me. Mirrors distorted, reflecting not me, but something larger. A body bloated with muscle, veins glowing faintly beneath stretched skin. Sometimes the reflection spoke, its mouth curling into his grin, though no words left my lips. Doors rattled at night, hinges bending as if under fists, slamming again and again. I reinforced locks, but locks mean nothing against shadows. The hardest part was the silence that followed. He didn't need to speak. His threat had already been made real. Each soundless moment thickened with the weight of violence withheld, violence waiting. I stopped sleeping in the bedroom, retreating to the couch, then to the floor, then finally to corners where I could watch all doors at once. But even there, the smell of sweat and iron wrapped around me, and the faint tremor of footsteps reverberated in the floorboards. I thought about leaving, about disappearing into another city, another life, but the dread followed me. Beyond walls, even on buses, in diners, in crowded sidewalks, I felt the heaviness of his breath at the back of my neck. Once I stepped into a restroom and saw writing scratched into the mirror. "You ruined me. Now I will ruin you." The letters dripped faintly like fresh cuts in glass. The line between him and me began to blur. My arms twitched, veins pulsing beneath the skin, as though something inside pushed outward, demanding more space. I felt strength where there shouldn't be any. Sudden bursts that frightened me, snapping a chair leg in my hand without realizing it, denting a wall when I stumbled into it. My body, once small and fragile under his gaze, was changing. But it wasn't growth. It was infection. His shadow wasn't just following me, it was rooting inside me, building muscle on my bones, wrapping veins around my heart. At night, I dreamed of injecting needles, of swallowing pills I had never touched, of standing before mirrors and flexing a body not mine. When I woke, my arms ached as though torn by impossible weight. One night, the dream didn't end when I woke. I opened my eyes to find him crouched in the corner of my room, skin splitting where muscle strained, eyes black but burning. He didn't move, didn't speak, he only breathed, chest heaving like a furnace. The sound filled the air, deeper than thunder. I blinked and the corner was empty, but the air still vibrated with his breath. The haunting grew bolder. Neighbors began asking questions about noises, crashing sounds at night, heavy thuds against walls. I smiled weakly, lied about furniture shifting, clumsiness, anything to keep them away. But I knew the truth. The building itself had become his gym, his arena, his barracks. Every wall carried echoes of his training. Every hallway reverberated with his rage.
Now, nights stretch longer. The air grows heavy with the scent of sweat and iron. My dreams blur with waking life until I no longer know if the footsteps are real or imagined. And every time I close my eyes, I see him, not as the man I once feared, but as something bigger. Veins glowing, body splitting, hatred alive. And I know this isn't over. Because shadows don't need armies. They only need someone to hate. The weeks after his discharge blurred into a haze of dread. On paper, he was gone, stripped of rank, cast out, his career destroyed. In reality, I felt him closer than ever. His body might have been exiled, but something heavier remained. The absence of his presence was itself a kind of presence, like a pressure drop before a storm. At night, I heard him first in echoes, a grunt, sharp and guttural, vibrating through the walls, the faint clank of weights dropped on concrete, though the building around me had no gym. I smelled him too, metallic sweat, acrid chemicals, the bitter tang of steroids burning through pores. The air thickened with it, pressing into my lungs until I gagged. My dreams stopped belonging to me. They became his training ground. I found myself on endless obstacle courses, skin tearing as I climbed ropes slick with blood. His shadow loomed over me, pacing, veins alive with something darker than blood. Whenever I stumbled, his voice erupted in wordless roars, shoving me forward until I collapsed. But I never woke when I hit the ground.
I only woke when his hand closed around my throat. Marks began appearing on my body. First bruises, then scratches, then welts, as though a whip had lashed across my skin. I told myself I was hurting myself in sleep, thrashing, clawing, but some mornings the marks formed patterns, parallel lines like finger marks, circles pressed into flesh as though from ropes. I started seeing him outside, on the street, across intersections, standing too still. His frame towered over crowds, muscles straining against invisible seams, but his face was always blurred, like a photograph smudged with water. Each time I blinked, he was gone, but the echo of his stare stayed lodged in my chest, heavier than when he had been real.
The worst came when I looked at myself too long. In photographs, my face began to warp, jaw sharper, neck thicker, veins creeping across temples. In the mirror, I sometimes caught his grin stitched onto my mouth. My own eyes glowed faintly with the hunger I had once seen in his. I slammed the glass to shards, but reflections only multiplied, each shard showing more of him, less of me. I realized then I hadn't destroyed his career. I had only displaced it. He no longer needed the army. He had found a new body, a new vessel. Mine. Now every step I take feels less my own. My thoughts blur with his whispers, words I can't fully hear but feel in my muscles, in my bones. Rage pulses beneath my skin, a fury not mine but grafted onto me. And when I pass strangers on the street, I catch myself staring too long, fists tightening, chest swelling with a hunger for violence I never wanted. His threats were never empty. They were promises. And I am becoming the fulfillment.
By the third month, I no longer measured time in days. I measured it in episodes of intrusion, new bruises I didn't remember earning, new mirrors cracked by fists I didn't recall raising, new hours of blackout where I resurfaced somewhere else, drenched in sweat, trembling with rage that wasn't mine. The shadow of him no longer lingered outside. It lived in me. I felt it when my muscles tightened too fast, veins bulging with no exertion. I heard it in the snap of my breath, a guttural grunt rising from my throat in moments of silence. I smelled it in the sour sweat that clung to me, metallic, chemical, wrong. At night, the transformation grew louder. My bones ached with the tearing of phantom muscle, skin crawling as though stretched too tight. I woke to find scratches across my arms, words carved into flesh by fingernails too strong. Finish what you started. The apartment became a training ground. Furniture toppled, walls bore impact marks where fists had slammed again and again. Once I woke in the kitchen to find weights stacked neatly from nowhere, steel plates smeared with blood as if lifted by raw hands. My body throbbed with exhaustion, yet I couldn't recall lifting anything. Dreams no longer offered distinction. He stood in everyone, swollen and grotesque, veins glowing black, teeth bared in a grin that split his face. Sometimes he marched in formation with an army of shadows, all faceless but built like him, chanting without words. Sometimes he crouched beside me, whispering into my ear until my skin burned. You took my future. Now I take yours. One night I dreamed of the barracks, steel beds, the smell of iron and rot, walls sweating with condensation. He stood at the end of the row, but this time, his face was mine. The body was his, monstrous and swollen, but the eyes staring back were mine, gleaming with hatred I didn't know I carried. When I woke, my reflection matched the dream. Jaw too sharp, veins crawling across my temples, eyes flickering with something not human. I stopped leaving the apartment. The world outside felt fragile, unprepared for what was building inside me. Neighbors stopped knocking, friends stopped calling. Their absence was a relief. I no longer wanted witnesses.
The final unraveling began with the sounds. At first, faint drills in the night, boots stomping, whistles shrieking, weights crashing against concrete. Then louder, closer, until my apartment shook with the cadence of a phantom platoon. Shadows marched across the walls, dozens, hundreds, all swollen with his form, veins glowing as they passed. I pressed myself into a corner, hands over ears, but the sound wasn't in the air. It was in my chest. My heart beat in rhythm with theirs, thundering like war drums. My lungs heaved with their breath, each inhale thick with iron, each exhale vibrating with rage. Then the mirror cracked on its own. A single fissure split the glass, widening slowly until the surface shimmered with distortion. From the fracture, his face emerged, not separate from mine, but layered over it. Our mouths moved in unison, but the words belonged to him. You ruined me. Now you wear me. The glass shattered outward, shards embedding in my skin. But instead of pain, I felt surge. Strength flooded my limbs, tendons taut, veins alive. I roared, not my voice, not fully, and the room trembled with the sound. The shadow army filled the apartment, faceless but grinning, bodies bulging, each one a reflection of what I was becoming. They surrounded me, chanting with no language, only vibration, shaking the air until plaster rained from the ceiling. In the center of them, he stood, original, massive, grotesque, skin splitting to reveal cords of blackened muscle, his grin split wider, eyes gleaming with triumph. I lunged at him, fists swinging, but our blows landed in unison. His strength was mine, my pain was his. Each strike echoed inside my bones, each bruise mirrored on his flesh and mine. We were not enemies. We were the same body fighting itself. The room collapsed around us, walls splintering, floor groaning, but the fight never ended. Hours, days, I don't know. Time dissolved into impact, roar, blood, until finally I understood. I hadn't destroyed his career. I hadn't ended his power. I had given it new form. By exposing him, I severed him from the machine of the army. But hatred doesn't dissolve when uniforms are stripped. It mutates, searching for a new body, a new host, and I had given him mine. My betrayal of him had bound me tighter than fear ever could. Now, when I catch my reflection, I don't know whose face stares back. My jaw bulges, veins crawl across skin. My grin splits wider each night. My body swells with strength I never wanted. My breath rattles with rage that isn't mine.
The army marches still. Inside me, around me, endless. I feel their boots in my chest, hear their chants in my blood. And at the front of the line, leading them, is me. Or him. Or both. I don't fight anymore. Fighting is pointless. You can't battle a shadow when the shadow has already moved inside your skin. I thought I ruined his career, but all I did was free him. And now, I am the ruin.